Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict in this case?
No, Your Honor.
Do you feel like that it is likely that the jury on continued deliberations will reach a verdict?
No, sir.
Let me ask you this. Has the jury considered the highest level of the offense?
Yes, sir.
Is there a disagreement as to the highest level of offense?
Yes.
That's where your disagreement falls?
No, I'm sorry. It is not. That is not the case for the highest offense.
Okay. Does the jury agree on the highest level of offense, that the defendant is either guilty or not guilty?
Yes.
What is the verdict in that?
Not guilty.
Okay. So the jury has found the defendant not guilty of first-degree murder?
Yes.
Okay. May I borrow the charge book for a minute so I can look at the verdict form? If you need it back to look at it, just tell me. Has the jury considered the second level of the offense attempted first-degree premeditated murder?
We did consider that.
Is there an agreement that the defendant is not guilty as to that offense?
Yes, sir. There is an agreement.
Has the jury considered the level of offense second-degree murder?
Yes, sir.
Is there an agreement that the defendant is not guilty as to second-degree murder?
Not guilty.
I have not asked you specifically, but are all of these agreements unanimous as to these levels of charges?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
We have one shaking his head.
Beg your pardon?
We have one shaking his head.
I'm sorry. My question, and I'll come back in. My question was, is it unanimous that the defendant is not guilty of second-degree murder? And I'm going, since there was it's my question. Is there an agreement on that level of charge?
Agreement with who?
None.
Oh, I'd say not guilty on that one.
Sir, ma'am? Not guilty as to second-degree murder. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That clear that up, General?
Yes.
Has the jury considered the next level of charge, attempted second-degree murder?
Yes, sir.
Do you all find the defendant not guilty of attempted second-degree murder?
Yes, sir.
Each of you? Ma'am? Okay, I'm looking at you because I want to see, and if you disagree, just let me know, okay? Now let's go back. We did not do this as a first-degree murder charge that I'm told you found him not guilty of. Is that correct? Okay, I see head nodding affirmatively. And attempted first-degree murder. Is that correct as well? Okay. Has the jury considered the charge of voluntary manslaughter?
Yes, sir.
Is there an agreement, or has the jury found the defendant not guilty of voluntary manslaughter?
There was no agreement.
No agreement? Is that the level of the offense at which there is disagreement?
Yes, sir.
Is that correct, ma'am? All right. Would the state like the jury polled as to the first four level of charges?
No, Your
or as to the level on which there's a disagreement. I think since we don't have a verdict, there's no reason to poll the jury as to that level. You agree, Mr. Taylor? I'm going to ask each of you this question. You just tell me, would further deliberations be of any value?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Do you all believe that the jury is hopelessly deadlocked with respect to the charge of voluntary manslaughter? I see everybody nodding their head yes. The court will enter a verdict of not guilty as to the charge of first-degree murder. The court will enter the charge of not guilty as to attempted first-degree premeditated murder. The court will also enter a not guilty verdict with respect to second-degree murder. And the court will also enter a not guilty verdict with respect to attempted second-degree murder. The court believes that the jury is hopelessly deadlocked with respect to the next level of charge, that is voluntary manslaughter. Is there any reason that the court should not declare mistrial at this time, General?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Taylor?
No, Your Honor.
Court will enter and declare mistrial with respect to the charge of voluntary manslaughter. I want to say something to you. The jury, having completed the work as required by law and by this court, is discharged and excused with the sincere gratitude of the court. Judge Parham and Mrs. McMahon have asked me to tell you that you are excused from further service in this term. You do not have to report in August. You've done more than a share. I understand the personal sacrifices that each of you have made to be here every day on time, and specifically the sacrifices over the 11 hours plus in 2 days that you have spent attempting to reach a decision in this case. I thank you for your work, for your time, for your dedication to this case, because that is dedication to our system. That's dedication to our jury system and our effort to provide a fair trial.
All right now you can see the judge is going over the typical thank you to the jury. They've done their job. They've done it well. So I want to take this opportunity to bring in my guests here in studio, former prosecutor Tommy Pope. Also joining us, trial and family law attorney Michelle Thomas. Always great to see you in person and have you here. Michelle, thank you for joining. This is really huge news, a little unusual. I had predicted a hung jury, Tommy. Let me start with you, simply because I didn't see enough evidence, even though some may say, yeah, he probably did it. I didn't see that evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. But comment on the fact that it's a hung jury on one charge, but a not guilty on the 4 top charges.
So it sounded to me, and I followed the evidence as you did, I think the defense did a good job of putting some reasonable doubt in there. It makes you wonder 10 years later what was different, you know, to make you try it now than before. But, you know, what the jury's really saying is some of them believed, and I believe it's based on his character or conduct, there was some heat of passion, potentially, that would have mitigated a murder case down to a voluntary manslaughter case. But I'll be surprised if they ever try it again. Yeah, a case of this age, and you can't even get them to agree on voluntary, I would be surprised if the defendant faces a trial again.
Yeah, you do wonder, and so you can have a split verdict. Obviously, Michelle, that's what's happened in this case. So he cannot be tried again for first-degree murder, attempted first-degree, second-degree murder, or attempted second-degree. Huge win for the defense. Now that potential voluntary manslaughter could come back as a trial, but I think part of this does hinge on the motive. The fact that they showed that pretty close in time before she disappeared, she filed for divorce. He may not have liked that. What are your thoughts about this verdict?
Yeah, good afternoon to you both. And this is really unusual. We don't see these split verdicts often. But given that the jury was unanimous regarding not guilty for the top 4 charges, I think it sends a message to the state that this is not a case that they should try again, and they should not allocate resources to this case, particularly after a decade plus has passed. So I do think that. Now, in terms of the last charge of manslaughter, I mean, they could. The divorce, obviously, they were at odds and there was a lot of tension, and, that breeds, crimes of passion, if you will, in those moments. But I think the jury sent a message that they thought the evidence was a little weak and that this is not a case to try again.
Good points. Tommy, let me ask you, as a former prosecutor, investigators gather the evidence, they give it to you, you look at it 10 years down the line. Is it always going to be a aha, now we have some evidence connecting, this is evidence I think I can use to prove beyond a reasonable doubt? Or can it sometimes be a, I still don't think there's compelling enough evidence, but we're going to try it, it's 10 years down the line?
I could never see trying it if I had that question in my mind. What'll happen and may have happened here, previously one of your guests had said something to the effect of maybe a new prosecutor came in and he's now looking at all the old, he or she looking at all the old cases and wanted to take a shot at it. But, it wasn't like you had a new smoking gun or suddenly had the DNA evidence or had the secret witness or something. So it seemed to be a difficult case for the prosecution, that the pieces were there, but they're never really tied together for them, I didn't think. And, to prove, as you know, to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt, you got to tie them together.
Yeah, absolutely. And by not tying them together, or did it make a difference to you, Michelle, that the kids, he raised the kids after Karen disappeared, and then her body was found, of course, by a cemetery under kudzu. But in the meantime, the child testified for the defense, and he raised them and raised them well. I think a jury's going to consider that.
Absolutely. It certainly does support the defense's case. I mean, yes, there was issues of domestic violence, and he may have been presented and portrayed as a horrible husband at the time, but maybe not necessarily a horrible human being, because he was able to be compassionate and raise children who came to his defense and testified on his behalf. And so the jury is going to have to, they had to weigh that and consider the fact that he continued on to be a father, a dedicated, parent to these children. And so it does sort of cause a jury to take a pause, and particularly if there was doubt to begin with, and say there was certainly reasonable doubt, because this was such a circumstantial case.
Yeah. Now, behind the scenes, tell us, if this were your case and you were still prosecuting this case, how do you staff it? Who do you speak to decide, are we going to retry him on the voluntary manslaughter or not?
I think for starters, you'd have to say, because normally it's somewhat victim driven. Ultimately, the prosecution represents the state. I have to always explain, I don't represent you, the victim, I represent the state, but you are interested because you're dragging them through it. I thought, as Michelle said, it was interesting, and I thought it was very effective by the defense to bring this daughter in, and, they didn't overplay it. They didn't try to push, my daddy wouldn't do this or anything. They just made her sympathetic and grown and again, help spread the seeds of reasonable doubt.
I agree. They didn't overplay it, because they never did ask, do you think that he did this or not? Also, I felt like they really did leave it with, they didn't have any problems with the dad. They've been raised, and it was really, really tragic because they lost their mother. And I thought it was beautifully played, obviously worked for this jury. You're both going to stay with us. Again, just to reiterate, not guilty on the 4 top charges, deadlocked on the voluntary manslaughter. Will he be tried for that or not? We'll have to wait and see what the state decides to do.